Notice of foreclosure sale. The words were just sitting there in cold, stark print on the letter I was holding. This wasn't from a bank. It wasn't from the government. It was from our homeowners association. My wife, Sarah, and I had been living in Maple Creek for 5 years, and we had never, ever missed a mortgage payment. And yet, here we were, on the verge of losing our home over a fight that started with a cheerful 2-foot-tall garden gnome. This is the story of how our HOA president, a woman who got drunk on her own tiny bit of power, twisted our community's rules to pull off a brazen fraud. It's the story of how she legally foreclosed on our neighbor's house and how we had to expose a family conspiracy to stop her from coming for ours next. For the longest time, Maple Creek was the suburban dream. It was the kind of place where kids left bikes on the lawn and you actually knew your neighbors' names. The HOA was mostly just there. It was a background thing that kept the pool clean and sent out polite little reminders about trash cans. The board was made up of laid-back, long-time residents whose philosophy was basically, as long as nobody's house is on fire, we're good. But all of that changed when Carol got elected. Carol had moved in a couple of years before all the trouble started. It felt like she was born with a clipboard in one hand and a list of violations in the other. She ran for HOA president on a promise of restoring neighborhood excellence and protecting property values. To a lot of us, it sounded fine, maybe even good. We'd all seen a few unmowed lawns. We had no idea we were basically voting in a dictator. She won, of course. A handful of votes in a low-turnout election was all it took. And the laid-back vibe we all loved? That was her first victim. Within a month, the friendly reminders became formal, threatening violation notices. The rules had always existed, buried in a thick binder somewhere, but they were never used as weapons. For Carol, that binder was scripture. She didn't see the CC and Rs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, as guidelines. She saw them as an ironclad legal text to bring down on anyone who dared to step out of line. For the first year, it was just dumb, annoying stuff. A notice that our mailbox needed a fresh coat of paint. A warning that our kids' basketball hoop was visible from the street. We'd roll our eyes, do what she said, and move on. It was just easier than putting up a fight. But we were being naive. We didn't realize Carol wasn't just enforcing rules. She was probing for weakness. She was figuring out just how much power she could grab before somebody tried to stop her. The first real sign of her endgame was when she blew up all the volunteer committees. The landscaping committee, the social committee, the architectural review committee. Poof, all gone. She pulled out some obscure clause in the bylaws about the president's authority to restructure for efficiency. She merged all of their power into a new group, the Executive Architectural Review Board. And who was on this new, super powerful board? One person, Carol. She had made herself the sole judge, jury, and executioner for the style, taste, and compliance of over 200 homes. It was a massive power grab that almost no one noticed because, honestly, who has the time to read the fine print on their HOA bylaws? The thing that kicked off our personal nightmare was a gift from my mom. It was a garden gnome. His name was Sherman. He was cheerful and a little goofy, and my 6-year-old daughter Lily absolutely adored him. We stuck him in a flower bed, kind of hidden between some rose bushes. You could barely even see him from the street. A week later, the first letter showed up. It was a formal violation notice. Per Article 4, Section 2 of the Maple Creek CC and Rs, it said, all exterior decorations, including statuary, must receive prior written approval from the Architectural Review Board. The fine was $50. It was ridiculous. I took a walk and counted at least 20 other houses with unapproved decorations, bird baths, pink flamingos, you name it. So I decided to go talk to Carol. I caught her on her morning power walk, marching down the sidewalk in a perfectly clean tracksuit. I tried to be calm. Carol, I said, I get the rule, but it feels like you're being a little selective here. My daughter loves this gnome. Can't we just figure this out? She stopped and gave me this smile that was all teeth. Rules are rules, Mark. They create a uniform look that protects our property values. Those other homes? They've been noted. They'll be getting notices too. She let that threat hang in the air for a second. Just fill out an application. If the board finds it tasteful, it might be approved. The board, which was just her. She wanted me to formally beg her for permission to keep a gnome she'd already decided was a violation. It was such a blatant power trip. Something in me just snapped. It was the sheer petty arrogance of it all. I told her I wasn't moving Sherman, and that's when the war started. The fines started piling up. $50 turned into $100. Then came a new letter, adding a $25 per day penalty until we cured the violation. While this was happening, something weird was going on next door. Our neighbors, the Hendersons, were an older couple who'd lived in that house for 30 years. Mr. Henderson was a master gardener. His wife, Eleanor, baked Christmas cookies for the entire block. One morning, a moving truck was in their driveway. I walked over. Mr. Henderson looked like a ghost. "We're leaving, Mark," he told me. His voice just hollowed out. I asked him why, and he just shook his head. "The HOA," he mumbled. We can't do it anymore." He wouldn't say anything else. A week later, they were gone. The house just sat there, empty. A for sale sign never went up. Instead, a legal notice was tacked to the door. Notice of trustee sale. The house was being foreclosed on. Rumors started flying. I overheard someone at the pool say the Hendersons had been buried under thousands of dollars in fines and fees. Their crimes? Their front door was a shade of beige that Carol had decided, after the fact, was unapproved. They had a tiny, barely there crack in their driveway, and Mr. Henderson's prize-winning roses had apparently crept a few inches past the lawn border. It sounded crazy. Nobody thought an HOA could actually take a house for stuff like that. But they can. In our state, if fines and assessments go unpaid, the HOA can place a lien on your home. And if that lien isn't paid, specifically if your delinquent regular assessments reach a certain threshold, like $1,800, they can start foreclosure proceedings. Carol was using this law as her nuclear option. The fines against us were closing in on $2,000. We were getting letters from a law firm now, a particularly nasty one called Franklin and Price. The letters were dense with legalese, throwing around words like liens, asset attachment, and legal fees. Every letter they sent added hundreds more in legal costs to our bill. Sarah and I were terrified. This wasn't just a neighborhood bully anymore. We were up against a legal machine. We spent every night at the dining room table, surrounded by stacks of paper, long after Lily was asleep. We downloaded every HOA document we could find, the CC and Rs, the bylaws, 2 years' worth of meeting minutes. It was like trying to learn a new language, one designed to confuse you with loopholes. Our first real break came late one Tuesday night. We found the section on board governance. It said that while the president could issue fines, putting a lien on someone's property required a majority vote from the board of directors at a public meeting. We checked the minutes for the last 6 months. There was no record of a vote to put a lien on our house, or on the Hendersons' house. So Carol was either breaking the rules or holding meetings in secret. We started digging into the other 2 board members. One was a young guy who traveled constantly for work. The other was an elderly woman who, neighbors said, was in poor health and hadn't been to a meeting in months. Carol was a de facto one-woman board, using their absence to claim she had their approval. She was using their apathy and their poor health to ram her agenda through with zero oversight. The foreclosure auction for the Henderson house was set for a Friday morning on the courthouse steps. Something told me I had to go. I had to see who would buy a house this way. The public notice said 10 a.m. I got there at 9:45. It was already over. A clerk was packing up. "Sorry, you just missed it," he said. I told him the notice clearly said 10 o'clock. He just shrugged. There was a revision posted online yesterday. Moved it to 9:30. That was a massive red flag. Changing an auction time at the last minute is a classic move to kill competitive bidding. I asked who bought it. The clerk read off a name. An entity called Creekview Properties, LLC. As I was leaving, I saw Carol. She was standing off to the side, talking quietly with a man in a suit. He was smiling, and she squeezed his arm. He looked familiar. I'd seen him with her at a barbecue. It was her husband, Bill. My blood went ice cold. I raced home and got on my computer. I searched for Creekview Properties, LLC. The company had been registered just 2 months ago, and the registered agent, the sole officer listed on the state's business website, William Bill Price, Carol's husband. It all clicked into place, and I felt sick. This was never about rules. It was a racket. Carol targets a homeowner, someone vulnerable, like the Hendersons. She drowns them in bogus fines. She refuses to negotiate, then sends them to the law firm to rack up insane legal fees. Once the debt is big enough, she starts the foreclosure. Then, her husband, hiding behind his shell company, snatches the house at a rigged auction for the cost of the HOA debt. They didn't get it free and clear. The bank's mortgage was still there. But they had stolen the Hendersons' entire life savings, all the equity they had built over 30 years, gone. And they were setting us up for the exact same thing. If you think that is one of the most disgusting things you've ever heard, do me a favor and hit that like button, because the scam went even deeper than we knew. And if you have your own HOA horror story, I seriously want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. Let's shine a light on these people. The next letter we got was the one I was dreading. A notice of intent to file lien from Franklin and Price. This was it. The last step before they could start foreclosure. But now I had a name for the law firm, and I had the name of her husband's LLC. So I started digging into the firm. A quick search for Franklin and Price brought up the partners. The managing partner was David Franklin. And his partner? Robert Price. Price. Same last name as her husband. I felt a jolt of adrenaline. I did a little more digging, checking public records, social media. Robert Price was Bill Price's brother, Carol's brother-in-law. The whole disgusting thing was a family business. Carol, the HOA president, created the violations. Her brother-in-law, the lawyer, piled on huge legal fees to make the debt impossible to pay. And her husband, the investor, snatched up the property. It was a racketeering scheme, hidden inside the boring bureaucracy of an HOA. Sarah and I knew then that we couldn't just defend ourselves. We had to go on offense. We couldn't afford a lawyer to fight this machine, not with the thousands they already claimed we owed. But the same bylaws Carol used against us had to have something we could use against her. We found it in Article 3, Section 5, Special Meetings. The bylaws said a special meeting of all homeowners could be forced if 25% of the homeowners signed a petition. At that meeting, the community could vote on anything, including the immediate recall of the entire board of directors. This was our shot. We weren't just going to save our house, we were going to take our whole community back. For the next 2 weeks, we ran a secret campaign. We printed up our evidence, the timeline of the Hendersons' fines, the public record of the sale, the business filing for Creekview Properties with her husband's name on it, and the proof that her brother-in-law ran the law firm. We put it all on a single easy-to-read page. Then, we started knocking on doors. We went out after dark, avoiding the streets where Carol's few friends lived. We'd hushed conversations on front porches. The reaction was like lighting a fuse. So many people had their own story about Carol's petty abuse. A $100 fine for a trash can left out an extra hour. A $200 fine for a patch of brown grass during a drought. A warning for kids' chalk drawings. Everyone was living with this low-level anxiety, but they all thought they were alone. Our evidence showed them it wasn't just petty, it was criminal. We collected signatures one by one. People were terrified of retaliation, but the fear of losing their own home was stronger. We even found a guy in the neighborhood who was a forensic accountant. He offered to look at the HOA's budget, which was our right as homeowners. What he found was the nail in Carol's coffin. He found a clear pattern of outrageous payments from the HOA's own bank account to Franklin and Price for legal consulting. The money trail was undeniable. Carol was using our own HOA dues to pay her family to help her steal from us. In 10 days, we had signatures from over 40% of the homeowners. We filed the petition. Carol had no choice. She had to schedule a meeting and face the very people she'd been terrorizing. The night of the special meeting, the community clubhouse was packed. Standing room only. You could feel the tension in the air. I saw people I hadn't seen in years, all of them drawn out by the promise of finally getting some answers. Carol and the 2 other board members sat at a table up front. For the first time since I'd met her, Carol looked nervous. She tried to start the meeting by talking about landscaping. Someone from the back yelled, "We're not here for that. We're here about the petition." The whole room erupted. My heart was pounding, but I stood up and walked to the front. "My name is Mark," I said, "and my family is being targeted by this board. But this isn't just about us. It's about the Hendersons. It's about every single one of you." Over the next hour, we laid out everything. We put the evidence up on a screen for everyone to see. The deed to the Henderson house, with her husband's company listed as the buyer. The company registration with his name on it. The law firm's website, with a picture of her smiling brother-in-law. We passed around copies of the violation letters people had given us, showing the pattern of harassment. Then David, the accountant, got up. He calmly walked everyone through the finances. He showed them how Carol had paid her brother-in-law's firm over $50,000 from the HOA's accounts in 1 year, for work that should have cost a tiny fraction of that. He showed how our money was being used to fund the whole scheme. The room went dead silent, and then it just exploded. People were on their feet yelling, demanding answers. Carol stood up and tried to deny it all. "This is a smear campaign," she shrieked. "These are all lies from a homeowner who just doesn't want to follow the rules." But the proof was right there, in black and white, from public records and the HOA's own bank statements. Her 2 board members looked like they were going to be sick. They clearly had no idea what she'd been doing. One of them stood up and resigned, right there on the spot. A motion was made from the floor to recall Carol and the entire board. When the vote was called, it was a sea of hands, almost unanimous. Carol just stood there, her face white, watching her little empire crumble. Someone had been recording the whole meeting on their phone. By the time we left the clubhouse, the video was already going viral on our town's Facebook page. The fallout for Carol was swift and total. The new interim board immediately hired an independent lawyer and froze all of Carol's pending fines and legal actions. On behalf of the whole HOA, they filed a massive civil lawsuit against Carol, her husband, and her brother-in-law for fraud and racketeering. We also managed to find the Hendersons, who were living with their daughter a few states away. When we told them what we'd found, they joined the lawsuit to get their home back. All of our evidence, including the video of that meeting, was handed over to the district attorney. A criminal investigation was officially opened. It took over a year for all the legal fights to finally end. The criminal investigation led to charges of conspiracy and fraud. Facing a mountain of undeniable proof, Carol and her family settled the civil case. Voiding a foreclosure is incredibly rare and difficult, but the evidence of fraud was so blatant that the court ruled the sale of the Hendersons' home was fraudulent and returned the title to them. To cover the huge settlement they owed the HOA and the Hendersons, Carol and Bill had to sell their own house in Maple Creek, the very base of operations for their scheme. They left town in total disgrace. Our community healed, but we didn't forget the lesson. We started the long process of rewriting our HOA bylaws, adding checks and balances to make sure no one person could ever grab that much power again. Committees now require multiple members. The financials are independently audited every year, and any foreclosure action requires a full vote of the community. Our story is pretty dramatic, I know, but it shows what can happen when good people stay silent for too long. HOAs are supposed to protect a community, but power without accountability is a dangerous thing. We learned you have to read the documents, know your rights, and most importantly, stand with your neighbors. Our war started over a garden gnome, but it ended with an entire community taking back its freedom. We saved our house, and in doing so, we helped save our neighborhood. Thank you for sticking with our story to the end. It just goes to show you that a few determined people really can fight a corrupt system and win. If you found this story compelling, or if it taught you anything about the power you have in your own community, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We got lucky. We had neighbors who were willing to stand up and fight with us. Always be engaged where you live, because you never know when you're all going to need each other.